So hey guys, I am Sakshi. I am from the value creation team at MBA and Beyond, and also your host for the night. With me, I have these two really great speakers, Sneha and Harshul. So I would want you guys to take ahead and give your introduction. Maybe Sneha, you can start with you, and Harshul then.
Hello, everyone. Sakshi, am I audible? Okay. So thank you, Sakshi, for starting us off. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be interacting with you. My name is Sneha. I graduated from HEC Paris. I completed my MBA from there with an exchange term at Kellogg School of Management. I'm currently working as a corporate strategy and planning manager with a government company in the Middle East. I have had brief stints with other companies in Europe in the strategy area. I have worked as a strategy consultant with Bosch and then as a strategy manager with a leading ride hailing app in the Middle East region. In totality, I have around 8+ years of experience, and I've been associated with MBA and Beyond for more than 3 years now. So it's a pleasure to be interacting with you, and I'm really looking forward to some intriguing questions and answering them. Over to you, Harshal.
Thanks, Neha, for the great introduction. Hi, guys. Uh, I'm an NCR graduate from the 2021 July batch, and prior to that, I did my master's in finance from IE Business School, and I've been involved with MBA and Beyond on an off basis, and I've been part of a few of these sessions as guest speaker. I'm currently based in Germany, in Munich, and I work for the in-house consulting arm of Allianz Consulting. And prior to that, I worked for 5 years with EY for their consulting arm, delivering projects across the world, including US, UK, 10 plus countries in Southeast Asia, a few more in Europe, and then finally, of course, India. And yeah, I'm looking forward to all the questions you guys have, and would be happy to tackle them one at a time. Back to you.
Great, thanks, Harshul. So I think one thing common with Harshul and Sneha is both of you have done your exchange term in the US. Harshul at Wharton and Sneha at Kellogg. So good to know. So now to begin with the session. So let me just explain the flow of the session and how it's gonna go. So in the first 20 to 25 minutes, we will be answering the questions that we have received already from the applicants beforehand. And in the next 20 to 25 minutes, you guys have the floor to yourselves, and you can drop in the questions in the chat box and also raise your hands, and we'll pick you guys one by one for answering the questions. So to begin with the questions that we have received, the first question is, what specific advantage does the January intake offer that distinguish it from other intakes?
Sure, maybe I can start this one. As INSEAD offers a second intake from January to December. Essentially, what I've seen is, at least with INSEAD and a couple of other schools that offer slightly longer MBA programs, they usually come with a handy option to do internships. And the aim of these kind of internships is to sort of break into a new industry or a new geography that you've been targeting. So that sort of fits in very well with your MBA aspirations. A lot of guys, a lot of candidates actually, they always say this, right? You can change your industry, you can change your geography, or you can change your business line. And depending on how many of these are you trying to change at the same time, having an internship actually favors this decision making. And INSEAD, for that matter, for the Jan to December program, which is a 12-month one, that one offers internship, whereas the other one, which is the regular intake from September to July, which I was part of, that one doesn't allow for internships. Having said that, INSEAD specifically does have the option for you to then choose internship in this particular program, which is the J batch, but then you won't graduate with your fellows. You will graduate somewhere in between July and December, which means that it can be sort of a standalone experience, and that takes away the whole fun out of the MBA. Yeah. Back to you,
All
sir.
right. Yeah. So thank you, Harshal. I believe Harshal has had first-hand experience of INSEAD, so he has shared a lot of snippets about his experience and about the school in general. I would like to touch base on other schools, including HEC Paris. So there are two things here. First is, like, there are certain schools which have only January intake in European region, like your IMD, then your Rotterdam, like Erasmus School of Business, ESMT Berlin, and then there are certain schools which offer both the intakes, like September as well as January. Now, if in terms of overall quality of the program and its pedigree, is there any difference? No, there isn't. It doesn't have any bearing on how the program is delivered, but there are certain nuances that you have to consider. Now, I will like start with the HEC aspect here. Now, for HEC Paris, it's a 16-month long program, and essentially it's divided into four parts. Now, for September intake, the sequence in which these four terms happen are slightly different than how it happens for January intake. So there is a fundamental phase and there is a customized phase. So the specialization, which is the last term, it happens from September to December of the subsequent year of your intake for the September cohort, and it happens in the third term for the January intake. So essentially, you get an opportunity to mingle with your peer and cohort of the September intake during the specialization phase. So that is one. Second thing is, if you look at the internship aspect, in Europe in general, the internships are slightly longer. Schools, like many employers, they do offer like a 6-month long internship. And unlike US, in Europe, it's not that you have a very elaborate MBA specific openings or campus placements. So in that situation, like your internship is a good link or it's a good conversion point for you to transition into the job market. So if you are from September intake, you complete your studies in December, and then you can start your internship from January. And if you're from January intake, any which ways you are doing your final phase, which is your electives, or you can do an MBA project, which kind of frees you from all your curricular activities, and you can do an internship there. So again, so it depends on how you want to tackle that. Now, in terms of graduation, the cohort is the same. So the entire batch, so be it September or January, it's only 4 months difference in terms of tenure of completing your studies, but you graduate together in the same ceremony. So even the INSEAD point wherein you don't really get the opportunity to graduate with other peers, that doesn't happen in HEC. You would all the students would have the graduation ceremony in the June. So that's, so in terms of quality and like the professional opportunities, there isn't much of a difference. It's just that you get like 4 months of additional time in terms of preparing your application if you're not ready for the September intake. So that's how I would answer it.
Got it. Thanks for sharing, Sneha. Moving on to the next question we have, how does the competitiveness of the Jan intake compare to September intake? And that should applicants be aware of?
Sneha, would you like to take that one first?
Sure. So honestly, I mean, both the intakes are equally competitive. So there isn't much difference in terms of your acceptance rate and the quality of process per se. It's equally competitive. The only thing that I see as a challenge is this, because INSEAD, if you go for the January intake, you have an opportunity of 2 months of internship. So students who want to do that internship, they prefer going for a January intake vis-a-vis students who are more sound, and they are pretty much decided about their next career move after MBA. So that makes the January intake slightly more competitive for INSEAD. That's my reading. Again, Harshal can throw light in that. But for HEC, it doesn't happen that way. It's equally competitive. In fact, there have been instances that I know of, like, for HEC, it's like a it's a 12-month long process. So every month you have one admission deadline. So in that situation, say for example, you're based on your overall profile, the diversity quotient for that specific intake has been fulfilled, then you are offered a seat in the subsequent intake. So for example, if you applied for September 2020 2024, But like maybe for Indian applicants, there is like 40-45% of the batch is already of Indian applicants, and then like 20% of them are already Indian males. So in that situation, if you are a compelling candidate, they would definitely offer you an opportunity to take admission into the subsequent intake. So that is one part. And second thing is, like as I say, like the process is exactly the same. You have a jury every month, and the criterias that the institute look at, they're also the same. So there is no difference in the competitiveness of it. Harshal.
Sure. Thanks, Neha. You included quite a few tidbits, so I'm just going to reiterate the same point. While there is not much difference between the two intakes for INSEAD specifically, the fact that there is the primary difference is the internship part. This begs the question on the requirements of the candidate. If a candidate wants to shift their geography and let's say business line, or geography and a job, and let's say get into consulting, because INSEAD is primarily a consulting school, then it would be more advisable to actually apply for the Jan to December one, because a big percentage of internships that happen during these 12 months also convert into full-time job offers, which in a normal year, if you go for the September to July intake, might be a little difficult to crack. So while from a competitive perspective, I would say both batches both have about 500 candidates in them. So it doesn't, from a competitive perspective, it doesn't make or break anything, but it comes down to the requirements of the candidate. If they want to change their geography, change their business line or sector, then it's more advisable to take and apply for the internship path. And in that case, you can then sort of expect that other candidates who are applying to the same batch also have a similar preference. So even if the competition is more, it's between similar application and peers. Yeah, that's all from my side.
Got it, Harshal. Thanks for sharing. Moving on to the next question we have. Could you provide us a step-by-step breakdown of the application timeline, and how can candidates strategically plan their application timeline to maximize their chances of success for Jan 25 application?
Oh, that brings a lot of memories specifically. Just to give some anecdotal information, when I was applying, and I had already done a master's before applying for the MBA programs, so I was quite confident that had I had to do it again, it would be easier for me. Maybe I can thrash it out in a week or something, right? And I tried to do that, and I ended up applying in round two for INSEAD for the July intake with about 1 week to go. I was super confident. I looked at the questions, anticipating that I would already know how to answer these. I looked at the questions, and it felt like a booby trap, like an Indiana Jones movie. Any question that you touch, there's a implication in the background that um, you should expect the moment you read it. I can go into X level of details of that, but just to stay at a high level for now, I realized that the INSEAD application cannot be done in one go or in 1 week or maybe not even in 1 month. So then I put INSEAD into my round three bucket and started preparing for other schools first. And then going through this recurring cycle of answering other applications, I realized that it took me 4 or 5 applications before I could start answering the INSEAD questions in general. And I think talking to some of the coaches here within MBA and beyond, this is more or less a theme. At least INSEAD requires you to have a certain level of maturity in answering your questions, so it cannot be your first application. We would never recommend that. And second, even if this is, let's say, your fifth application, it would still require you to go again through the same process of sort of doing a big introspection, and it requires time. So depending on the number of applications that you want to do, typically we would say, a, a good amount of time should be kept at hand. Add another 3 or 4 months of GMAT preparation, because every candidates want to sort of up their score while they are also doing their applications. I would say anywhere between 9 to 12 months in advance would be a good point to start. Some candidates are still more aggressive and want to, compartmentalize this and do this in a faster sense. But given the option that you do it nicely and at a decent pace, definitely 9 to 12 months. If you have a gun to the head, then maybe faster, but then you have to also consider that the candidates would have their regular aspiration job, a job wise, what they're doing. They have other things to take care of. Maybe COVID breaks loose. I was one of the candidates who had to burn the brunt of COVID, and I graduated during COVID. So all of these kind of things can happen, and sort of can make it very difficult for you to adhere to the timelines. So definitely keep a buffer, and definitely start 9 to 12 months in advance. And it's a plus if you already have a decent GMAT score. And when I say a decent GMAT score, I'm an Indian male engineer candidate. So a decent score for someone like us is 700 plus for sure. If you have other interesting profiles, let's say you're from a military background, let's say you're a doctor, or something very unique about your profile, then maybe we can play around with the scores a little bit. Back to you, Sana.
Right. So I think Harshal elaborated it in quite detail, and it's very comprehensive. But there are like few more things that I would like to add here. Like what all is required when you decide to put an application for MBA. So one is your GMAT. Second is you really need a good good CV. Third is your networking bit, how passionate you are about this school, how much you know about this school. Fourth is a great level of introspection, like why do you want to do an MBA in the first place, and also like what your goals are. And then fifth is your when you actually start fleshing out these essays. So it's quite a consuming process, I would say. uh, there is a lot of introspection and there's a lot of research, both primary and secondary. So at MBA and Beyond, there is a very methodical process, and whenever any candidate they come to us, we advise that sooner the better, because more time you have, better is the quality of your overall application. So that is one. Second thing is, like even if I just touch base on how much approximate time is required for each of these stages. So GMAT, I think it's very subjective. Some people can prepare for 4 or 5 months and then and then get the score. Some require a bit of retakes, so it might take somewhere between 6 months to 1 year. After you have your GMAT score, then you start then you start researching about the schools. You start networking with your peers, with the students and alumni of these schools. And third thing is, then you actually go into the application bit. So your CV will take anywhere between maybe 3 to 4 weeks, and then your essay writing will take quite a bit of time. So just to give you an understanding, INSEAD has close to 9 to 10 essays, and HEC also has an equivalent amount of essays. And these are not just the essays, there are also quite a few qualitative questions that come in the application when you start filling it out. And the questions are they are not very superficial questions, and the people who are going to analyze and evaluate those answers are also, they are very thorough, and they are very learned people. So they know if you have like put up your application in a jiffy, or you have actually given a big and thorough research and a review before you put in your application. So just going by the sheer volume of work that is required to be inputted in this overall process, I believe somewhere between 7 to 8 months minimum is required. That is one. And second thing, if I just have to talk about the timelines, once, like when you're ready to apply, so Arvind, for any of the schools with January 2025 intake, will start between February and March. And some schools have like 4 admission deadlines, and some schools have a recurring or rolling admission. So it varies on school, but it will start somewhere between February and March. So I hope that answers the question which has been asked.
Yeah, it does, Neha.
And just to add, Sneha she put out a very detailed answer, probably much better than how I covered it. So I would give a resounding yes to all the things that she said.
No, Arshil, I believe your answer was quite detailed too, but definitely it's like two
Yeah.
ways of answering the question.
No,
Moving
I
on.
just covered few things which Harshal had not, but yours was more anecdotal, so I think most of the applicants will be able to relate to it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, moving on to the next question. So guys, after one or two questions left, we would be taking on the questions that are in the chat box. So you can, start entering your questions over there. So the next question that we have is, are there specific industry concentrations or specializations that are popular among Jan intake students? Maybe Harshal, you can go ahead.
Sure. Um, so that's a good one. See, in INSEAD, at least the studies there, and for the MBA program, you do your studies in 5 periods, and essentially the first 2 periods have courses that are common and need to be completed by all candidates. Then comes the electives, which is P3, P4, P5. If you have an internship, you also have a P6, but that's just the internship part. Essentially, all 3 periods thereafter are based on electives. There are no specific concentrations, but students do tend to sway one way or the other. Maybe let's say you want to cover more finance related subjects, so it's up to you on how you want to mix and match your approach. Maybe you want to go into investment banking, maybe you want to go into consulting, maybe you want a tech job with a product management sort of a profile. So again, comes down to how you want to tinker with the program and extract the best juice out of it. Now, having said that, since INSEAD is a consulting school, there comes a point where you have to also sort of figure out what what are the how do I say this? What are the courses that are closer to consulting? And then also there are some courses like negotiation, like power talk. Um, while these are more on the softer side of a softer skill set, a lot of students actually end up taking these, and these are some of the best courses that INSEAD has to offer. And a lot of things also to be learned on the organizational um, I'm forgetting the name, organizational business side. So, which basically comes down to how you navigate corporate structures. And this comes in handy no matter if you're in investment banking or consulting, or you end up in one of these corporate leadership programs for candidates. So, the answer is no, NCR does not offer any specializations. Having said that, it allows you to tinker with the electives and select the ones that you are most interested in. That would help you sort of figure out your next steps. Over to you, Sneha.
So yes, so HEC does offer specialization, but I think I covered in my first answer that the specialization phase, it's the same for both September and January intake. And there are, I guess, 4 or 5 concentrations: your marketing, finance, strategy, digital innovation, and entrepreneurship. So irrespective of the intake, you can take any specialization. And second thing is MBA project. So this is one opportunity for you to strengthen your maybe your area of interest, and also if you can club it with your internship, then it kind of gives you an edge in terms of building your knowledge base. So that is about the academic part. Second, I believe, was more about the recruitment part. Like, is there any specific industry which is concentrated for a specific intake? So I mean, I do there are two things here. First is for consulting firms, the MBBs and all your other tier 2 consulting firms, your Deloitte, Monitor Deloitte, then Carney, and then like others. They all have specific timelines for specific intake. So for example, the September cohort, they complete their studies in December of the next year, and January intake, they complete their studies in April of next year. So the application timeline of these consulting firms are different for these two intakes. So that is one, and you have opportunity for that. And second is like in general, other opportunities which are made available, so they are common to both the cohorts, because the peak of recruitment, it starts somewhere between September and October of every year. But there are also a lot of cohort specific events which are organized by the career development teams at many schools. So is there any one industry which takes precedence for any specific cohort? No, it doesn't. But there are ample opportunities and equivalent opportunities available for both the cohorts.
Got it, Sneha. I think the next question that we have is in the same lines as your previous answer, which is, can you provide insights into recruitment trends and industry demands for Jan 25 intake graduates? So maybe Harshul, you can answer a little bit of this part.
Sorry, Sakshi, I've missed the question. Maybe there
Yeah,
was some
it's yeah,
internet issue at mine.
no worries. It's can you provide insights into recruitment trends and industry demand for Jan 25 intake graduates? I mean, Jan intake graduates.
That's a tricky one. Um, I mean, I would say there's, with the onset of AI right now, there's like a generational shift, I would say, in the hiring processes. Um, and at the same time, we are also dealing with a little bit of a downturn in Europe and the UK, for that matter. US is booming, but then, in spite of doing the Wharton exchange, once I got there, I got to know that sponsorship opportunities are quite limited, or at least used to be back during COVID. So I would say the upcoming job opportunities in general, there's always a wave sort of a curve, right? Sometimes it's down, other times it's quite high. Um, Having said that, there's massive hirings that is happening at the current point, and I can only talk for consulting and a little bit about technology. Massive hiring that's happening in Middle East, decent amount of hiring happening in UK. Europe usually requires some sort of a language prerequisite. So definitely not tier one, but the moment you start looking into these leadership programs in corporates, or you start looking into in-house consulting programs, which I am part of, as long as you're sticking to the main multinational companies, the requirement is quite basic, and NCR requires you to take up an additional language before you graduate. So you end up doing like A1, A2 proficiency in a language of your choice, and that generally opens up a couple of other countries where you can start, where you can try for your applications. And a lot of students end up using this path, including me. And yeah, so far it's been good. Now, looking at the trends, I would say I still see a lot of hiring happening in the Middle East going forward. So definitely schools that have a big in into the Middle East markets, for example, INSEAD, HEC, LBS. Um, these are the good ones. IESE from Barcelona, again, a very up and coming, uh, strong school, and going neck to neck with INSEAD when it comes to consulting jobs. Yeah, so that's it. Singapore, I've seen that since COVID has had a little bit of issue. So usually, unless you are okay to be based out of Malaysia, um, the hirings there can also happen. Singapore by itself is a little difficult, but then employers are coming out with these other local or other more international job profiles, like basing you out of Thailand or basing you out of Malaysia or Australia, and then doing sort of giving you a scope for Southeast Asia as a whole. So that happens as well. I hope I answered the question.
Definitely. Ashil, I think it was more to the insights of the current trend in Europe and Asia. Sneha, I think we can, if you have anything more to add, or we can move ahead. So I believe
We can move ahead,
Jay,
Sakshi.
yeah, great. So guys, now we'll start taking on the questions. So we have this question from Jay. So Jay, I believe Harshul has pretty much answered this question about consulting and the job market. So if you want, you can just raise your hand and we can take up the question again.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the next question we have from Aditya, which is built into three parts. Maybe we can take the first two, which is how can one build a holistic profile for INSEAD? And are there any unstated qualities that they look for in candidates applying for MBA?
That's a tough cookie, I would say. The only things I can talk about here. So India definitely, and they publicly state this. They have an upper limit of 13% of the batch intake for any country when it comes to representation, which means out of a batch of 500 people, the maximum number of Indians that can make it to NCR is 65, and we do make it every single time. Probably the only country after COVID, China hasn't been meeting that upper limit, but India has been, and probably the only country remaining on the roster that does this. Um, Having said that, you have to understand that it's not a straightforward path to say, okay, I want to do consulting. I have X number of experience in tier two consulting, and this is what I would want to do in my short term, long term goal. That's like a cookie cutter never works with NCR. You have to bring up you have to connect the dots. You have to connect your aspirations, whatever work you've done so far, what are your motivations, connect them, and then then try to show that you've done your research, secondary and primary, and then put it all together into one concoction. That makes you unique. There's no set path to get in, and just to give you examples, I've come across people um, that have very unique profiles. Just to talk about the student group that I was part of, and these were all different nationalities. So we had one Indian, one Chinese, one person from Netherlands, one from Italy, US citizen based in Taiwan, and then Portuguese based in France. So everyone's unique in their own part. They came from R&D background. They came from some of them were professional, they were part of the adventure sector. So they hike and they do tourist groups and take them across countries for a living. So very unique. Another friend of mine was in FMCG, but was a national level sky jumper, had done more than 700 jumps so far. Very unique things that make up their profile. And for India, I do understand these sort of extracurriculars are a little bit difficult. But if you do have something unique about your profile, I would definitely suggest you to bring it out in the application, but at the same time, not as a standalone thing. Try and link it with your motivations and future aspirations, and connect the dots. What makes you unique? Maybe you learned a new skill set. Maybe it was a group, it's a group sport. Maybe it's something to do with giving back to the society by helping out others. Take a pick and try and connect the dots is all I would say.
Got it, Harshal. Talking about unique profiles, I know a case, in NCAD where the applicant was a yoga instructor for many, many years, and they wanted to do an MBA because they wanted to do their, build their own brand, and also kind of looking for investors and someone to run the tech aspect of the product. I think Aditya, to answer your questions, a lot of diverse profiles. Um, then we have the next question from Jay, which is also around INSEAD. That is, how much commitment would be necessary during INSEAD MBA in terms of hours per week, both in class and offline preparation with peers? Would weekends be occupied fully as well for academic or extracurricular stuff, or will there be some air in between weeks?
So they say at NCR, you get to do 2 out of 3 things. You party, you network, or you study. And you get to pick what you want to do, right? And most people end up doing studies and networking, which then sort of converts into a party mode as well. But INSEAD, because of its unique how you can sort of structure your program, you can do exchange programs with Wharton, but at the same time you can also go to the Middle East office, or you could go to Singapore for one of the terms or periods. So that involves a lot of travel. And this makes the INSEAD experience very unique, but at the same time also requires you to be always on the move. So you would be traveling a lot. So you would be networking a lot. So I would say if you're going to NCR, 5 hours is average you're getting for a year, and you're going to be pumped about it. So don't worry too much. I haven't come across anyone who did not make it through. So you're in safe hands if you make it there.
Got it, Harshul. Thanks for sharing. The next question that we have is from Siddhi, which is how to prepare for scholarships. What kind of scholarships are offered? So maybe Sneha, if you can take this one.
So there are three types of scholarship. One is like your need-based scholarship. Second is like your there are certain scholarships which are very specific to school. So, for example, HEC has a scholarship which is offered by L'Oreal. I'm sure INSEAD has certain specific scholarships. IMD has one scholarship which is sponsored by Hilti and one of the ex-professors of that school. So there are certain school specific scholarships, and third is there are these are like global laurels, I would say, like your Forte Foundation and all these, which are, I mean, the aspiration of these foundations are to inculcate and empower women to go forward in studies. Now, the need-based scholarship, it depends on which part of world you're coming from, what your financial status is, and then if you can convince to the jury that you are in need of the scholarship, then most of the times at least some percent of your tuition fee is covered. Then there are certain qualitative aspects which are also taken into consideration for your HEC Foundation scholarships, and this holds true for all the European schools. So it is your GMAT, it's the differentiation point that you have in your profile, and also it's like, say for example, if somebody is coming from underrepresented groups or countries, then they get a precedence as far as scholarship is concerned. And second, for the specific scholarships which I spoke about, like your L'Oreal scholarship, or for scholarships which is your Forte Foundation. So there are detailed essays which you have to submit, and I believe when you start the application process, your scholarship application is also explained alongside. So it's about how do you put your case and how passionate you are about and how strongly you answer that questions. All these factors combined together, it helps you get that grant. There is just one additional thing that I would like to mention here. There is a lot of collaboration that's happening between Indian and French government. Since HEC and INSEAD both are based in France, there are certain scholarships that you can apply for. It's called Charpak Foundation Scholarship, and there are, I guess, three or four. But again, there are certain demographic and because age related and other criterias which are there. But I know quite a few students who have got those scholarships as well. So I hope this answers the question.
Got it, Sneha. Anything, Harshal, that you'd like to add?
No, so everything that my peer said applies. Just one small detail for NCRD, there is no separate scholarship essay. When you complete your primary application and you are about to submit it, you get a pop-up which asks you which scholarships do you think you are applicable for. So you just read the descriptions of the scholarships that are available on the page, tick, tick, tick. You can even select multiple items and submit. It's as simple as that. Other schools can provide you scholarship based on a need basis or a performance basis or on the basis of some sort of if you're part of an underrepresented group, as mentioned before. So those parts obviously need to be brought out in the scholarship essay, and the usual correlation between some sort of a calculation where you have explained on where you've done an initial calculation on how much funds do you require to complete your MBA program successfully, including all sorts of different travels, food, etc., leisure. And then you sort of break it down and say, this is what I can manage, this is what is the delta, and I would need support here for A, B, C reasons. I'm simplifying it, but that's how you do it.
Got it, Harshal. Got it. Okay. Moving on to the next question, which is what leadership faculty and courses are there? Specific experiences for leadership at both schools.
So I believe the mantra or goal of these schools, not just NCR, HSC, or any elite or premier business school, if you consider, they want to carve out future leaders. So if you look at the essence of all the programs, it is centered around that. If I have to touch base on few aspects wherein you get to hone your leadership skills, I would say at HEC you have an elective called as purposeful leadership. Then there is lot of different evaluation criteria wherein your leadership credentials are assessed, and also they are not just assessed by the peer by the faculty, it's also assessed by your peers. So how you have taken the initiative, how active you have been in contributing to the overall upliftment and overall knowledge sharing of the peer you are studying with. So there are multiple factors, and I believe the whole churn that happens during these 12 months, 16 months, whatever tenure you want to pick, it actually makes you a better person and also ingrains in you quite a few qualities that make you a better leader. So that is the behavioral aspect of it. And for the academic aspect, there are quite a few forums and there are quite a few learning modules and workshops, case studies, which are specifically designed by these schools, wherein you get opportunity to interact with corporate leaders, with social leaders, with political leaders, so that you get nuanced understanding of different facets of leadership, and also some life learnings from that.
I couldn't have covered it in a better way.
Yes, actually, I have a question if I can ask.
Got it. Sure, you can go ahead.
Hey, hi Ashul, hi Sneha. My name is Akhil. Just wanted to ask a question. What is the percentage of split for females out of the 65 at NCR in every batch? I mean, is there a preference? Just calculating the odds here.
So see, more and more the B schools are trying to sort of equalize this gender gap. So at least I can talk about my personal experience. I think in my batch, the female candidate representation was about 33%, and I think since then it has gone up further. I am also sure if you do a quick Google search, you will be able to find the latest statistics on it because most of the schools want to publicize this statistic. Um, I know that all B schools are more or less gunning between 35 to 40% at this point. But I would say, I would say, depending on the profile, you should. I mean, the best way to to have better chances is to one definitely have a higher GMAT score, and then of course have bring out the uniqueness in your profile. And you can't do much beyond that. No point in thinking about all these kinds of statistics.
And is 35 too late to apply as an Indian male applicant?
That's a good question. Depends on the overall experience. I would say that if you have, and I think at this point, if assuming that you graduated at 22, that's about 13 years of experience, more or less. I think you would be more suited for an executive MBA at this point. Even if you apply, they might come back to you and say, why don't you go and apply for the executive program? So there are two programs available, which one is called EMBA and one is called GEMBA, GEMBA. Both have different sort of profiles. You should check them out and see which one fits better for you. Having said that, we did have a couple of candidates who were, I think, 34 for sure. 35, I can't say. And then there was one Indian friend of mine who was 33 years old and had about 10, 11 years of experience when he applied and he got through. So yes, definitely a small percentage of candidates who come at that age bracket, but it's not impossible.
Good, thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next question we have is from Radhika, which is she has heard that it's difficult to get into B schools when one has no consulting background, but wants to transition into it. I have an audit background. Is it true for NCR and HEC as well?
Sneha, do you want to take that up?
Yes. So honestly, I would like to defer to this, this conception that if you don't have a consulting background, you cannot transition into it. Because many a times that's also your post MBA goal, that you want to transition into an industry you don't have exposure to, but you are definitely inclined towards. That is one. Second thing is, if I just have to talk about, the requirements for getting into a consulting role, they look at you from a very holistic point of view. It's not just if you have worked in consulting or not. It's more about the quality of experience. It's your GMAT score, and it's also multiple things: your analytical skills, your people management skills, and all of that. So now, if I mean, many a times, like MBA is your I would say a bridge to get to your desired, I would say, post MBA aspiration, which is your consulting. And MBA also, facilitates a lot of learning that will enable you to make that pivot. And as far as like admission criteria is concerned, if you have a very compelling reason and selling point in explaining to the jury or the admissions committee, like why you want to go into consulting and how are you going to make that effort to transition into consulting, then that's your selling point. And if you can sell that, then I believe there is nothing that can stop you. So I believe that's a misconception that you need to have a consulting background or a big brand name to get into the MBA school and then transition into consulting. I mean, that's my that's my opinion. Harshul, if you would like to add anything.
Yeah, sure. No, all things except one point, I would definitely say that brands do matter, because with that comes a lot of consensus of a well-defined career charter or career path. Just laying it out there. I'm not saying brand, I mean IBM or McKinsey. I'm saying, let's say you worked in an NGO sector and you worked for the what's it called, Gates and Melinda Foundation, right? That's a big feather in your cap. So brands do matter, because with that comes a lot of legitimacy of your CV. Having said that, if you still have a different career path and you present it nicely, you connect the dots, it does make a lot of difference. Your thought process comes across, and the admissions committee is very favorable to these kind of applications. Now, coming to the path of whether if you don't have a consulting background, should you still be applying for consulting? I would say yes. I personally know of people who had nothing to do with consulting and ended up getting into the sector and to the tier one consulting firms, and are doing quite well for themselves. Quite close friends of mine. So just to give one example, one was an opera singer. So maybe she stopped doing mathematical and analytical subjects and she was, I think, 30 years old, so about 15 years ago, before she went for her first consulting interview. So it comes down to, like Sneha mentioned, it comes down to your career aspirations. As long as you make it to one of these top tier B schools, that's a legitimate yes and a tick in the box that this candidate deserves it. Now, the only question is, can you convince the other party to give you an opportunity and clear the interview, which is quite possible if you do the exercises. And usually all B schools have career departments that support you during this process. And of course, networking and connecting with your peers as well as your seniors helps a lot, because they usually pave the path for juniors to also enter these organizations. So definitely keep those activities up. Take your learnings, do the hard work, and you will make it through the process. It's not earth shattering. Every year, like a good 50% of candidates from INSEAD go into, at least get interview calls, right? And then majority of them end up either getting internships or getting straight offers. So it happens all the time. There is nothing new about this process. Just keep up the good work.
Got it, Harshal. Thank you so much for answering. We have the next question, which is what is the difference between GMAT and GRE for INSEAD, HEC, and other European schools? Either one of you can take it ahead.
Sure. I would say that's a tough cookie. Historically, from what I have known, there is no way to prove it. No, there's just probably just consensus informally between coaches who help with the application process. INSEAD doesn't favor GRE that much, is what I've heard. And in a personal case where my wife also applied for INSEAD, it didn't happen. So it could be because of her profile, it could be because she did GRE instead of GMAT. No way to pin it and say, take um, take to have a takeaway out of this. I do know that a GMAT is preferred for NCR. Other schools, I know that they officially, many schools officially communicate via their websites on what was their average GMAT or average GRE score.
Got it. Got it, Harshal. I think we can move on to the next question. So Sriram, to answer your first question about age bar, it's pretty much easily available on the school's website. So you can go through the website and see the age bar that they've mentioned over there. Then we have the next question from Sriram, which is what role did language play in pursuing a career in Europe? And an additional question, which is MBA truly an addition to your profile in Europe? What differentiates an MBA candidate from an in-house experienced professional?
So if I understand correctly, one is about the language. Second is about, does MBA really give you an edge in Europe?
Yeah.
Okay. So first and foremost, if when we're talking about the best programs like your HEC, INSEAD, IMD, or IZ, they do have a global appeal by the sheer volume of alumni which are present across the globe. So I mean, there is no geographical restriction as such. That is first. Second thing is, but of course, like if you're graduating in France from these schools, then your first preference usually is to work in the European region. So that holds true. Now, is language a barrier? It depends. It depends on the role that you're aiming for. So, for example, if you want to do if you want to be a strategy consultant in France, you definitely need to speak French. That is one of the requirements set out because it's a role which requires you to interact a lot with clients. But there are a lot of in-house consulting roles, especially with big companies in Germany, for example. Like Herschel is working with Allianz. I work with Bosch Group as an in-house strategy consultant. So there, it's a very global environment, and language is not a barrier in these kind of roles. So I believe it depends on what roles you're targeting, which country you're planning to work in, and I mean that can help you prepare because I know for many of my friends who are graduating with me, they did take up French very seriously, and by the time we completed our MBA, they had at least a B1 level of proficiency in French. So it depends on how you want to approach it, and I mean opportunities will also vary based on your proficiency in that language.
Yeah. Moving on to the next question we have, as someone looking to work in the Middle East post MBA, is there any benefit from INSEAD Abu Dhabi?
You can't do an MBA from INSEAD. You can only do an MBA from either France, which is Fontainebleau campus, or from Singapore. You can definitely do one of the periods in Abu Dhabi where some of the electives are being taught there offline. Having said that, if I remember correctly, the access to Abu Dhabi campus was restricted during COVID, so we couldn't go there. I don't know about the current process of whether it's possible or not. So take it as it is. You can obviously reach out to their marketing teams and get answers to these questions. The Abu Dhabi branch and I think one more in US. These are mainly open for the executive MBA programs.
Got it, Harshal. I think this is pretty much clear.
Mhm.
Then moving on to the last question, maybe, yeah. So, which is from Parth, that is how to represent the fact that one of the motivation during MBA of doing MBA should return to the current organization, but change the location. Is there any downside to this case?
On the
So if I
contrary, I
understand,
think it's a big advantage. Sorry, go ahead, Harshit.
go ahead. Yeah, that's why.
Okay. Yeah, so I believe the question is, if your motivation is to stay with the same organization but work in a different geography, can you represent that in your essays? And is there a downside to it? I believe that was the question, Sakshi, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that
So
was a good one.
okay, Parth, if you ask me, that's a big advantage, honestly, because many a times your goals and your aspirations, they want to assess your employability in the long run, because the pedigree of the school also depends on how much, how much percentage of the cohort is placed. So if you already have a very defined career path after your MBA, then that's like an added advantage. But I would not just stick with that. What I would also like to express is why MBA is important for you to do the transition. You cannot just say that you want to move from, say, Bombay to Munich, and that's why like you want to study at XYZ school. You really have to define the qualitative aspects of learning that will enable your career path. What are you set to get from that MBA that is a value add and kind of helps in your career acceleration? So there is an advantage to the employability aspect, but you also need to be very thorough in explaining why that why this transition is helpful as far as your career growth is concerned. Harshal, anything you would like to add?
A full-on thumbs up. It comes down to the story and how it makes a difference, like you said. Um, uh, Typically, I mean, in layman's terms, if you tell someone that you want to change your location but want to be in the same company, people would just say apply to internal job opportunities and make the transition like so many other people do. So, what value add would MBA do to it, which is what Sneha was trying to indicate. So you have to come up with, you have to do an as is to be analysis and say, okay, my as is profile, let's say, is a software engineer, and I want to get onto a managerial level at the headquarters in London, for example, for a services led company. And MBA MBA helps you fill those gaps, and then you connect the dots, you connect it to the schools, the unique opportunities that the school presents. Maybe your ex-employer already comes to the school, so you can also connect internally as well as externally via the HR events that happen, recruitment events that happen. Sort of tread your path, negotiate, and try to get a better role, try to get by default a work permit, or maybe there are some other opportunities within the same business group that caught your attention during the MBA, and you actually now want to sort of transition into something else also. That's also possible, and I've seen people doing that. But then again, you have to connect the dots and you have to um, the answer these tricky questions.
Got it, Harshal and Sneha. So we can just maybe take one last question, which is from Sumit. So Sumit, if you can just unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, I have a question for Harshad. Since you have done masters and MBA both from Europe, would you prefer like someone who has like 2 to 4 years of experience to either go for a masters and then do an MBA, or directly go for an MBA?
That's a good one. So, I mean, just to again give you an example, when I graduated from my bachelor's, this was the same question I had, and I decided that I didn't want to do IAMs from India. I wanted to do a global one like INSEAD or Harvard, and the masters would pave the road. And IE Business School at the time was in the top 10, so I was quite sure that if I do from one of the top 10 ones and then I apply for an MBA sometime down the line, it would help my case. Having said that, you have to look at the master's program and the maturity level of the average batch that comes, average candidate that comes to that batch. Some master's programs are for earlier phases, like master's in management. Um, MBA specifically for Europe, these are for advanced profiles. When I say advanced, I mean 6 to 8 years of experience. Generally, 3 to 4 years experience is not good enough, and you would probably get a reply from them saying apply again later on. I've dealt with, I've come across candidates who have received these kind of responses from the MBA schools in Europe. US schools usually have an average experience that is lower than the European schools or their average candidate. Maybe this answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So basically, if you have lower experience, but you want to go and do your MBA right now, probably US is a better place to do it. Obviously, you need the score, you need the profile, but I'm just stating in abject terms here. For European schools, higher experience is preferred, but if you have lower number of years but show a lot of maturity, then again, you can make it through the process.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sumit. So guys, we are at the end of the questions that we can take for today's session. But if we haven't answered your questions, you will receive an email from me after this session, and you can book a profile evaluation session, and we can answer your questions in detail.
I just have one more question for Harshal. Harshal, what is the wife's GRE score? Just curious. And how many years of
I don't remember. I don't remember right now. I think it was 324 or something like that.
Got it.
But she made it to IESE Barcelona.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, guys, I think that's all for the day. If you have any questions, do feel free to reach out to us over email. And guys, we also have the feedback form in the chat box, so please do fill that. Thank you so much, Harshal and Sneha, for joining in. It was lovely having you guys.
Thank you for having us, and Sneha for the lovely chat. Thank you.
Thank you,
guys.
Harshal. Thank you, Sakshi, for facilitating. And thank you, everyone, for your time. Have a great evening. Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Have a good day, guys.
Bye.